We began question 3. We did not finish question 3, but I realized that some of you would be here tonight that weren't here last week, and so I'm going to begin at question number 3. What effect has the idea of race had on man? By the way, what is question 1 on that paper? I don't have may I have one from you, Abby? Thank you, girls. You're wonderful. How many races of human beings are there? What is your conclusion? One. But, anthropologists have divided it into 4 races once upon a time. What were those 4 races?
Mongoloid.
Negroid. Caucasian. Australoid from Australia. All right? And the Australoid one, we said, is no longer acceptable to use. And so normally we talk about the Mongolian, that would be from Mongolia area, the Negroid from Africa, and the Caucasian. Is race a biological or a social construction? Social. Why not biological?
Because God made one man and one woman at the beginning.
We have excellent students here. We all come from Adam and Eve. Therefore, there is not a biological basis for dividing us into races. It is a social one, and we look at different things. Now, what effect has the idea of race had on man? What answers do we have so far?
Australian Aborigines were considered missing links between man's ape-like ancestor and the rest of mankind, resulting in terrible prejudices and injustices for them.
Did you all hear that? Thank you, Kelly. Give us your first sentence one more time.
The Australian Aborigines were considered missing links between man and ape-like ancestors.
The Aborigines in Australia were considered to be missing links. And I think I might have some pictures of that here for you coming up. But see, this is popular. And they say, well, those Aborigines look a whole lot like this area. And if I believe that man has developed from a lower life form, that opens the door to racism, and it opens the door to looking at these races are inferior to where we are today. Thank you, Kelly. What's your next sentence that you said?
I said it resulted in terrible prejudices and injustices towards them.
I thank you for that. This is a slide that I think is really significant for you. It's really hard to find it on the internet these days. But Darwin believed that each race of people, and in his day there were 4 races, he believed that each race evolved from a different ancestral primate. And the lowest class would be the Australoid. And then you have the Negroid, then the Mongoloid, and then at the top, according to Darwin and others who followed him, we call them Caucasians. But that was his belief. Man has developed. We don't have a common ancestor. But DNA was something that was not known at that time. And so this really has its roots, racism, in this idea of one race being superior to another. The Australian Aborigines, as Kelly said, were considered missing links between man's ape-like ancestor and the rest of mankind. We talked about that last week, but for those of you who were not able to be here last week, I really want you to have this information because you're going to be teaching your children and the next generations, I hope. So the Aborigines, I have to find the missing link, resulting in terrible prejudices and injustices towards them. Not only to the Australoid, it happened to the Negroid as well. We don't have a wonderful record of living together as image bearers of God. These are real photos of Aborigines, but these are old photos because, as I understand, there are really no, if I say pure Aborigines living anymore. They have all become mixed with other nationalities, but these children were taken, this picture was taken, and if you believe that we've come from lower ape-like creatures, you can say, well, look, I can see that's the missing link. Look at their facial features. Look at their hair. And so the missing link pictures that you and I have, not this photo, but I'm talking about drawings, they're all created by artists. There is none that have actually been found because there are no missing links, because there never is a missing link. We did not come from the animal world. We are God kind, not animal kind. There is, the drawing. This is a painting. And so that's what the missing link looked like. If we can find somebody like that, we have found the missing link. And they go to Adam and Eve. And if you want to accept that, you want to be, attempting to put the Bible compatible with historical science, you're going to have to find an Adam and Eve that looks something like that. This is an Aboriginal, these are farmers in Victoria, 1858. These would still be pure Aborigines. And so, you want to say, that boy standing up there sure looks like could be the missing link. And this is William Leighton, 1835 to 1869, considered to have been the last full-blooded Aborigine. And if you read up on him, his body was exhumed. That means dug up from the grave to have more testing done on his DNA. Really interesting. William Leighton with two unidentified women. Now, you saw this picture of Otabinga, 1904. We're talking 120 years ago, 118 to be exact. He's an African pygmy. Pygmy means of short stature, who was displayed in a cage along with an orangutan in the monkey house of the Bronx Zoo in New York City in 1906. That is how the idea of evolution really affected our thinking. And so we could put a pygmy in the monkey house in the Bronx Zoo and assign this young man a place with the monkeys. He's missing link. What effect has the idea of race had on man? Well, here is this African pygmy, Otabinga. He's 23 in that picture. Height, 4 feet, 11 inches. Weight, 103 pounds. Bought from the Kasai River, Congo Free State, South Central Africa, by a scientist called Dr. Samuel P. Werner. This is what happened because of the effect of racism of defining people in superior races and lower races. It's not from the Bible, it's from the devil. He was exhibited each afternoon in September. Here he is, posing at the Bronx Zoo in the Monkey House, 1906. And they give him a monkey because you're dissociated. This is an example. This is missing link. So what we believe, what we teach, is going to come out in our culture. Somebody has said, what you teach children today is what the church and the culture will be like 20 years from now. I think there's some real thought to that. By the grace of God, this is now, something so embarrassing and so wrong, but that's what it was at the time. This is Margaret Clapper. She's a missionary. She's standing among pygmy men. These are not boys, these are men of Zaire. If you want to think man came from another earlier life form, you could say, wow, look at that. They are inferior to me. Here's another picture, another missionary working with the pygmies. Here he is again. These are our brothers and our sisters, made in the image of God. The affected is this: it was largely responsible for the enslavement of thousands of Africans. Slavery can be traced back, at least Americans' involvement with slavery can be traced back to this whole idea of one race is inferior to another race. There's a superior race. And so enslaving Africans was just considered, there's no problem with that. These are really not human beings. These are quite intelligent creatures. I don't know whether they called them animals. I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but they treated them as such. And so you have these kind of things. This would be what you call a slave ship. These men, women, were captured. They were trapped in Africa. You could pay one tribe to catch members of another tribe, and they would hold them for you in pits. And then they were loaded on the ship, and that's just how they were. And is it John Bunyan? Or is it John, who wrote Amazing Grace? John Newton, right? He was a slave. He ran a slave ship. And on that ship, there was the book, The Imitation of Christ. And he began to read that book. God changed John's mind. God changed John's mind. John repented, and he writes Amazing Grace because he knew what he had done, how many lives he had destroyed. Because these could be husbands, these could be fathers, these could be mothers, children, treated like animals. Also, it is at the root of Nazism. What is Nazism? Aaron.
The superiority of the Aryan race.
You are correct. The Aryan race, which we will get into here right away, but it's based on racism. The Aryan race is the superior race. And the Nazis, as you and I know them from Hitler and Germany, were seeking to implement the removal of all races except for the Aryan race. They were going to perfect the human being. They were going to cleanse the human race of these inferior races. And so Nazism led to the Holocaust. And do you children know what the Holocaust was? Joshua.
It's kind of looked like they sent those Jewish people to.
Joshua, you have learned well. It was the.
I learned about World War II.
You have learned well, Joshua. The Holocaust was the killing of how many Jews?
They killed over 1 million, I guess.
Over 1 million? Can anybody go higher?
6 million.
6 million Jews. That doesn't mention the other kinds of people that they killed. And so here you have probably one of the most familiar pictures of the Holocaust, where these families are being loaded on the train and they're going to be brought to the extermination camp. Because the Jewish race, according to Nazism, is inferior. The full title of Darwin's famous work is this. Look at that. On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's Darwin's official title. It's mostly referred to as the Origin of Species. They don't really want to be reminded of Darwin's theology. I think it's theology, how you interpret the world, and that natural selection, preservation of favored races. And Hitler was a firm disciple of Darwinism. Darwin envisioned simple life forms evolving into higher forms spontaneously. That was just natural. You didn't have to help it along. It just went through the survival of the fittest. And so the most powerful would survive, the weaker would die off, and that DNA did not get passed on. Well, that Darwin envisioned it spontaneously, Hitler wanted to encourage it and strengthen it and help it along. Although Darwin wasn't the first to propose biological arguments for racism, it had happened before Darwin, but his writings fueled the ugliest and the deadliest racism in the 20th century. When was the 20th century? Joshua again.
Probably in the year of 2000.
It stopped in 2000. It started in 1901 and ends in the year 2000. That's the 20th century. We're now living in the 21st century. Just like Abby, you're going to be 15 tomorrow?
Yeah.
Are you going to start being 15? Are you finished being 15?
Start being 15.
Think it again.
Stop being 15.
You're finished with being 15. You're going to start your 16th year. That's why the Koreans, they always say they're a year older than we are. Because they know that, okay, you would be 16. Because I'm on my 16th year. But in the 20th century, under such tyrants as Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, which you and I know as Lenin, that word Vladimir is kind of interesting, right? You have Adolf Hitler, follower of Darwinism. You have Joseph Stalin. You have Chairman Mao, who had the big revolution in China, killing millions, and Pol Pot. If you're my age, you remember Pol Pot from Cambodia, right? Killed millions of Cambodians. That is the root. Here you have Hitler with the black hair, and he's looking at some Aryan boys. How do you know they're Aryan?
Blonde hair, blue eyes,
Correct.
white skin.
If you have blonde hair, according to Hitler, and you had blue eyes, and you had to be tall, then you were of that perfect race, that wonderful race. Look at this. Hitler believed the people who belonged to the Nordic race were the only racially pure descendants of the Aryan race. Nordics are well built, they're tall, they're blue-eyed, blonde-haired. Today you call that what? White supremacy, right? Things change, but that's what Hitler believed. And he did everything possible so that we would have a super race. Therefore, Hitler believed Nordics were the master race. And since they're the master race, they have the natural authority to completely control and exterminate members of the low race, such as Jews. Hitler firmly believed, I'm doing the human race a tremendous blessing because I am getting rid of all this bad blood that comes from inferior races. We need a superior race. And how many of you know that he brought some people over to South America? I think it was Brazil. Does anybody know that? And he brought Aryans, men and women, to Brazil to form a society that would reproduce Aryans, pure Aryans. Also, in Germany, if two Aryans married each other, they were given an amount of money, marriage contract, is that what it was? And the government gave you money for marriage, money to have a family, and every time you had a child, 25% of that loan, they were marriage loans, 25% of that loan would be canceled. And so that was to encourage the Aryans to reproduce. So if you had 4 children, your loan was completely removed, completely taken care of. Also, he believed that inferior races, I'll just use this word, should be sterilized so that they could no longer reproduce. And all of that was to build a super race. That's Nazism's foundation, and that's one reason the United States, I believe, had to get involved with the war. This is a photograph of Jews. Yes.
Is that one of the reasons why, when they were doing all the war crime or war trials post World War II, that they found a bunch of people in South America, and that's when they were looking for them and whatever they were called?
Yeah, that's connected to that.
My other question is, I don't remember who it was, some French philosopher called it the Ubermensch, and that's where Hitler got the idea of the supermen. I don't know if he built off of Darwin and then started, was it Rousseau? I don't remember.
You are asking a question that I'm going to admit right away that I don't really know much about. And today with the internet, you can really learn a lot of things by Googling that. So, thank you. This is a photograph of Jews being put on these train cars for extermination, because that is an inferior race, according to Hitler. Not a very pleasant story, but I want you to know. Your philosophy, your worldview is going to affect, I suppose I could study it in another way, abortion. I think abortion has its roots also in an evolutionary model, because we're not image bearers of God. We are just advanced primates, and killing an unborn child is no different than killing a chicken in the real evolutionary model. Well, you boys and girls, question you've had, right? What color were Adam and Eve? Joshua?
White.
Brown.
Don't let these old guys scare you. Okay?
So light brown.
Light brown?
A middle color.
Kind of a middle color? Were you in my class once one time? I want to show you some beautiful pictures. When you went to Sunday school, how many of you had an Adam and Eve that color? Benjamin, did you have an Adam and Eve that color in Ghana?
Oh, yes.
Anybody have them look like this? Then you didn't go to school in China, or Korea, or Japan. Could they have been like that? Could they have been like the first one I showed you? Benjamin, are you sure? Could they have been? Red hair? I just went on the internet to find, Bible story pictures of Adam and Eve. Found it interesting.
Red hair is a mutation now, so they couldn't have been red.
I didn't hear you.
Red hair is a mutation. I have 3 red-headed kids. I've looked this up. I get it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. These look like they're from the Orient, right? Black hair, bearded. Yes, sir.
I know there's a devil in that tree.
You see the devil. Yes. You've got good eyes, Joshua. Really appreciate you. So that's interesting. What color were they?
A shade of brown.
A shade of brown. How do you know?
Because everyone's a shade of brown.
Everybody's brown. We decided that last week, right? You've all got that white paper in front of you. Lay your hand on the white paper and tell me if you're white. Nobody's white. We're all brown. We're all a shade of brown. That is correct. If we all come from one man and one woman, as the Bible teaches, how do we explain the many colors of people? And last week we saw a lot of different colors, and all of you said, they're brown, even the darkest people. You said, that's not black, It's brown. And you're correct. So, if we take a look at these things, and the darkest skin color, we're going to use capital A, B, A, B. And the lightest skin color, we're going to use the small a, B, A, B. Could Adam and Eve have been this color?
No.
I'm glad you say that. Tell me why they could not have been that color.
Because they wouldn't have had the genetic information to have light skin. Or
That's
to
right.
create light skin.
Would they have been this color?
No.
Why not?
Because then they would have lacked the information to have dark skin.
Benjamin, if you're going to talk, you got to get quicker than that. Thank you, Kaden. We love you. So understand, they would not have been either of these two colors. Where would they come on this graph?
Somewhere.
Abby, you want to come and show us? What information would they have needed?
Somewhere in this.
Because
They would have information for both.
you are excellent. They would need to have information for dark skin as well as for light skin. And so we believe, and if you go to the Creation Museum, right? What color is Adam and Eve there, Luke? Did you remember? Were they darker than you? Were they this dark? No, they're going to be in this range of colors. And they had information for both light skin and dark skin. So why are there people with this color skin today as well as this color skin? Kendon.
Because it's in their genetic code.
That's right. They inherited the darker skin from both their father and their mother. That is very good. I'm really happy with you. The next slide doesn't make any difference to you because I've told you everything. And so just understand that we believe Adam and Eve would have to have been a medium skin tone with the information for lighter skin and for darker skin. Now, you can go to hair color. You can go to eye color. What are you going to say about that? You think they had black hair?
One of them could have, one of them could have had blonde. You can get those crosses many different ways.
That's right. See, they would have to have had the information for all the colors of hair we have today, also for the color of eyes we have today. That information is there. And so different groups of people, their children have black hair, they have brown eyes. Another group, their hair is brown. Another group, there's blonde and blue. But all of that information has come from Adam and Eve, who would have had both informations in their system. Adam and Eve were probably middle brown, A, small a, B, small b, in order to have produced descendants with a wide range of skin tones. Somebody asked me and said, do you think that there were other color skin before the flood? Could there have been blue-skinned people? Red and yellow, black and white? Brown, brown, brown. Number 5. What environmental factors affect skin tone? Katie.
Sun exposure.
Sun exposure. Okay. All agree? Here is a map according to lightest to darkest skin color. Where do you see?
Equator.
That's right. The equator has the darkest skin people. As you go away from the equator, it gets lighter. Anybody want to explain that?
Sun exposure.
I'm not hearing somebody.
Less sun exposure.
Yeah, less sun exposure. You know, when we like here to get brown, right? We say that. I think it's becoming less popular because of such things as carcinoma and so on and so forth. But we know that when we're in the sun, we get darker. And so, why does that happen, by the way? Kendon.
The sun's UV rays.
The sun what?
UV rays, ultraviolet light.
Okay. The sun's rays, our body has a protection against the ultraviolet rays, and that is going to be what we call melanin. The more melanin, the darker we are. And so if a family, people here have lived here for many, many years, they are going to have more melanin because they're living under the hot sun day after day, week after week, and they are going to have more melanin, and that's going to be the dominant feature of them. Now, as they move away, I'm going to watch you, Benjamin, see if you get a lighter color living here in Iowa.
I will watch myself too.
But this takes time. The more, the longer we're exposed to sun, the more it is. Some of you know where Sri Lanka is. This is Sri Lanka right here. And you go there, and some of them are really, really dark. Some of them are really, really light. That's an interesting feature that I don't have an explanation.
Another fact, Al, going back to redheads. Redheads don't need sunshine to make vitamin D.
They don't?
So when you go to Scotland, where all the redheads are, that's Scottish, right?
Because they can survive without much.
This has been several years since I looked this up.
Okay.
I learned that.
I really appreciate that, really. I know you're speaking truthfully. And so those kind of things just enrich this class. Anybody else? This goes back to question 1. Just a little review. How many races of human beings are there?
1.
The human genome gives the evidence that all people originated from one woman, and there is only one race of people, and it's the human race. This is just a little review. We're going to go to the next one right away. So, the human race has gone through mutations of greater or lesser amounts of melanin and keratin, which gives you your skin colors. Number 6, what is the origin of the people groups we have today? Ben.
When they left the ark,
Yeah,
the 3 sons.
but that was all Noah's family, right? We don't know what colors they were. We have no idea about that. But today we have different people groups. We have Asian, we have African, we have European, Acadian.
Tower of Babel.
Thank you. I think that works. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel or Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Now when they scattered, what happened to the DNA? I think that's a good question. Here is a map. You see the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea. We believe the descendants of Japheth went into Europe. We believe that the descendants of Shem went down in this direction. And we believe the descendants of Ham went down into Africa. That's following DNA. And so, if you are European, you're going to say, well, I think Japheth was my grandpa once upon a time. You have Shem going over this direction, even the Chinese, Koreans, and you have Ham going that direction. Here's Mesopotamia. That is where you have the Tower of Babel. Now, was the Tower of Babel before the flood or after the flood? After the flood.
I was just going to ask, how many years after the flood was it? Because we just read a Bible verse that showed us the division from the Tower of Babel, but this map is going back to the flood.
The Tower of Babel is 100 years after the flood. Noah is still living. Noah's going to live 250 more years after the Tower of Babel. He's living when Abram is born. Fast history. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate your question. How would this separation cause each group to have distinct physical features? Well, the families that scattered from Babel. How many of you say Babel? Am I the only one? And how many of you follow Caden and say Babel? All right. So I will take turns saying it. Babel, I think, is what it really means. A baby babbles. I don't understand Babel. That the families that scattered from Babel brought dominant and recessive combinations of genes with them. So, Japheth's, Shem's, Ham's, they have those kinds of DNA. But their physical differences were trivial. What that means is this. What I mean by that is when you look at them physically, you're not going to see much difference, just like here in this classroom. There's very little physical difference. But every one of us carries dominant and recessive genes. And those are the ones we carry, and those are the ones that are going to get passed down to the next generation. Although a lot of them get lost between each generation. We all have the same basic brown pigment. We have all agreed to that. We all have that pigment. And we all belong to the same race, the human race descended from Adam. I go back to Adam because Noah comes from Adam and his 3 sons would come from Noah. But you have their wives. That's going to bring in additional DNA information. And so each wife, we don't know for sure, but we assume comes from a different family. And so there is all of that information that is in their DNA, and it's from those three couples that we really have our being. If you've ever been people watching, like you're at an airport and you got a newspaper and then you stick a hole in it so you can watch the people, right? It's interesting to watch people. You see they have different shapes, they have different colors, they come in different sizes, they have different walking styles, and I dare say, you think, well, that reminds me of so-and-so. Have you had that? I know, I don't know about you, Marcel and Benjamin, when you were in Korea, I know it was when I was in Korea, I would see Koreans and I'd say, oh, they look just exactly like she does in Iowa. You walk the way that person does. It's interesting. That doesn't happen immediately, but the longer you're there, you see, wow, each of these Koreans looks different. But the first week you're there, they all look the same and you can't tell them apart. And they'll say the same thing with us. They say, well, you all look the same. You know, say, how in the world can you ever come to that conclusion? Because we're really, really different. So are they. All of that information is in every individual. These differences are revealed within nationalities, as well as worldwide. No matter where you go, you're going to find people that have these interesting characteristics. And they're there because we all come from the same group. I can't believe it's 7 o'clock. These differences are minor, but nonetheless, they're visible. Adam and Eve possessed genetic variation for eye shape. You can have almond eyes, you can have round eyes, and eye color, and for all the other distinguishing characteristics as well. That's quite understandable, I hope, because what we see in eye shape today is there. As people migrated from Babel, different groups became isolated from others and likely married only within their language group. When God confounded the language, I think there were 70 languages. Am I correct on that? And so how many people were in this language group? Probably a large group of people. And they would migrate together. But they had DNA in that group that would be unique to that group, but other groups maybe had some of it. But understand, each of these groups had a certain amount of DNA. As they intermarried, certain characteristics would begin to dominate due to the group's small pool of genes. And so when you look at Asian people, they have black hair today, they have the almond eyes, and they have sort of a medium brown skin. Because that's the information there. You go to another area, they're going to have those characteristics. And they're going to, over time, different people groups display distinct physical characteristics. And that's why we have these different physical characteristics, and we look at people and say, well, I think you're from Asia, I think you're from Africa, I think you're from Europe, or whatever. It's time to stop, I think. Interesting?
Yes.
Now, I really want to know, I've got a lot of stuff. I'm just really enjoying Sunday nights. I have a lot of material. We can keep going. I want to go into the Tower of Babel. Is that all right? This is kind of leading into that. So expect that to happen. Thank you everybody for coming. We're going to have a closing prayer. Our Father, your word, your power, your wisdom, the way you orchestrate this world is so beautiful, so interesting. And your word gives us that wonderful perspective that you are God, you're Lord, and you have all things for your purpose, carrying out your will. May you bless what we have studied, and we give you thanks for a wonderful evening, a wonderful meal. May you bless us and make us your blessing. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, everybody.